Hey there, everyone. This is Chris McDonald, and happy to announce I have a special guest today, Bryce Longacre from Race Result. So we're going to be talking today about timing and race day scoring with Race Result equipment and utilizing Race Result 12 as an exporter and how to some best practices, things like that. So for those of you that have not used GoToWebinar before, you should have like a little taskbar thing on the right, and you can ask questions. We've got myself, Bryce, and Matt Avery answering those questions. And if people have a whole bunch of questions about a specific thing, then we will dive into that deeper. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get going. So today's agenda, first, we're going to talk about some best practices with the Race Result hardware. This is not a super deep dive. If you are looking for a really deep dive into Race Result hardware, two suggestions. One, reach out to Race Result directly, or two, they actually, I think about 1 hour ago, announced their annual International Timers Conference for 2023, and that is going to be in February in Colorado. So those are two great ways to learn more about the hardware. And then we're going to talk a bit about the Race Result software, specifically creating exporters. So if you've come to learn how to, time top to bottom with Race Result 12, we're not going to be focused on that. We are going to be focused on utilizing Race Result hardware and Race Result 12 as an exporter, which then leads us into our final point, and that is connecting to race day scoring. And we'll talk about both TCP/IP and file connections. And that will be we'll jump mainly into passive timing, but I will review briefly the active timing side of that. Most timers are not utilizing the active extension loops and active V2 chips, but for those who are, things are slightly different in setting up your exporters. So with that being said, I speak a lot about building your support network, and this is Sonke, this is not Bryce. The building out your support network is incredibly important as a timer, because you need to know who to contact when you need help. So obviously with race day scoring, you're going to click that help button. It's going to send a backup into our support team, and our support team will reach out to you, and that's a 7-day a week, especially on the weekends, as we know your timing. The same goes for Race Result. There is a specific line to get into them. So if you don't know this, you might want to write it down. And this is mainly into Bryce, but Mark, some of you might know Mark Bachman. They both help with support, but Bryce is the primary support. So support at usa.raceresult or support.usa@raceresult.com, or if you need to call in 303-390-1235. That's the primary line. And if you need support directly, utilize extension number 3. All right. So now we're going to get into hardware, and I'm going to pass the mic over to Bryce to talk about some best practices with setting up your hardware.
Thanks for the introduction, Chris. So just jumping right into the hardware here, I got some screenshots of our decoder screen here. So if you're not familiar with the decoder screen, this is kind of what it looks like. It's a 40 by 4 LCD screen. So looking at the decoder, this is the main menu that you'll see. And anytime you get a new decoder, the most important thing I'd say is setting your time zone, because if your time zones are off, you're going to have decoders that are reporting different times, and it's going to make your scoring very difficult. So first thing you want to do with any new decoder is go into the time menu, which you can see is the first highlighted option there. Now, the screen in the center here is actually what you'll see once you select the time menu. There's a couple options in here. The first two are for setting the running time and start time. We don't typically recommend using those. GPS time is a much better way of scoring, because all your decoders will be synced together over a GPS clock, which means they will be very accurate to each other. So the first thing to do to set the time zone is actually the bottom option there where it says configure GPS time. That'll take you into this third menu which allows you to adjust the time zone. So you can see this decoder itself is set to Europe, Amsterdam. That is the default time zone when you get a brand new decoder. So with the arrows selected on time zone, you would press OK one more time, and then you'll be able to navigate left and right until you find the correct time zone for where your race is located. Now, this shouldn't ever really change unless you are moving your decoder to a different time zone. Then you would need to change it again. So if you're timing races mostly locally, you set it once and you leave it there, you shouldn't have to worry about it again. I also get a lot of questions about the leap seconds. You don't need to adjust that. That changes every few years. We will update that automatically in the decoder firmware. So if you haven't updated your decoder firmware in a long time, that could be incorrect. Otherwise, you could just leave it as is. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Chris. The next thing I wanted to discuss is these startup options. So in the decoder, by default, when the decoder turns on, it's set to do nothing. And what that means is you have to go in and tell it to do a few things in order to get it prepared for your event, such as setting the GPS time so it actually has the correct clock, and then actually starting the decoder in timing mode. So I recommend a lot of customers set the startup options to GPS time and activate. That's the most commonly used one. But before I look at those, how you get to the startup options is it's actually in the systems menu. So on that right-hand side, third from the top says system. That'll bring you to the second LCD screen here where you have the first option says startup and default says do nothing. You can press the OK button until you find the desired setting. So this is the order in which they will go in, which is do nothing, set GPS time, and then GPS time and activate is typically what I recommend most customers use. If you are using your decoder online with a SIM card and you are want to enable upload as well, then you can use that fourth option in there, which is GPS time, activate, and upload. So what this does is it'll first set the GPS clock, it'll then activate the decoder in timing mode, and it will then enable the upload setting, which puts your decoder online if you have the SIM card configured properly. So this is a great option to set up with a new decoder. All right, if you don't mind going to the next slide. And then the last big thing I want to talk about is if you forget everything else, the biggest thing is make sure your decoder is in timing mode. If it's in timing mode, you will have data recorded and you will at least be able to go back and try to save your event if something else goes wrong. So on the left here, we can see this decoder is in timing mode, and I can tell this in a couple different ways. The biggest thing is that active LED towards the bottom next to the start button, that is lit up. That tells me that this decoder is in timing mode. The other thing I noticed is on the LCD screen on the right-hand side, it does not say press start, and it actually is showing chips that have been recently read. So it'll always show the last 4 chip reads on here. On the right-hand side, we can see it does say press start and the active LED is off. Both of these things tell us that this decoder is in test mode. So if you forget anything else, make sure the start button's pressed on the decoder. That way you at least have timing data to work with. So that's pretty much all I wanted to go over for hardware. Those are like the basic things. There's a lot more that can go into the hardware, but those are the basic settings you want to consider with a brand new decoder if you're not familiar already. I believe Chris is going to be going into a demo now, so I'll let him take over again.
Yep, so we're going to go into some demos. We've got 2 different race result files open, and then I have RaceDay scoring open as well. Now, we're not going to go into top to bottom how to use RaceDay scoring, but we are going to talk about connecting. Now, one thing I do want to bring up, and that is if you forget all of this and you're at a race and you're like, oh my gosh, how do I do this? You can click this Get Help button and go into View Help Documents, and you can quite literally type in race result, and you get 2 things here. If you're doing active, it gives you a breakdown of how to set up what we're going to talk about today. You can copy and paste that if you want to. And then it also has importing times directly from RunSignup or from race result, sorry. And this is an old version. I'm sure this will get updated as this video is pushed out. So it gives you a breakdown of how to do all of this. So again, if you forget everything that we talk about today, it is online and it is in the help guide in RaceDay scoring. And I believe it's also mirrored in the knowledge base in race result too. So we're really trying to give you the keys of the car to have a successful event here. So please make sure you review this stuff. So the first thing to note, and Bryce will back me up, and that is you see none of these people. Now, again, we're not scoring here in race result 12. So at the end of your race, you're going to see people, and you're probably going to have under your main window, you're probably going to have your event set as test event. And so we'll change that to test event. And if you've got it in a real event and you push information out and around in there, you're going to be using your credits. But if you're using it as a test event, you're not actually utilizing any of the participant data in race result 12. So you're not burning through credits. Just keep that in mind. So you want to make sure you're in a test event under main window. And if you've created the event from scratch, you won't have to do this, but I a lot of times copy a previous event. So I would end up, and I'm not going to do it, but I would go in and delete data, and then I would maybe go in and delete time or delete participants and delete times. So I'm not going to do that because I want to show you where this data is, because really the only place that I work in is here under timing. And I don't have any decoders live right now. However, I do have a good many chip reads for 2 different decoders. So the only place, unless we're using active and I set up a chip file, the only place that I'm really working with is timing points and exporters and tracking. So with timing points, as you normally do when you go in and see your systems, you're going to use the drop downs and select which decoder is pointing at which timing point. And then you can quite literally set up this event, we only did a file. But if I wanted to do a direct connect, I could set this to direct, and I could set it my timing points to start, finish, all, and I could go to TCP/IP. So my server name, it's going to be localhost, and my port, I believe, is 3601. And if I'm not remembering what it is, you can go into RaceDay scoring if you've already set one up, and you can go into your streams. You can edit a stream, and you can see localhost 3601. So we know that those two match. Now, if you needed to change these two, you just need to make sure they're mirrored in your advanced settings for your streams and RaceDay scoring. So I'll go ahead and save that. And I usually have 2 different exporters here. One for TCP/IP, and this goes along with everything, all of my decoders that I'm using will push out in one singular TCP/IP stream. So then with the files, I end up creating a file for each one of my locations. So I create a file for each specific timing point. So for this event, I only have one timing point. And so I only have one file location. For this event, this was a triathlon, and I had a lot of different timing points here. So you can see I had a number of different timing points. I have one direct, actually I might have 2 since this says direct 1, but I think I only have one direct TCP/IP, and I have a whole bunch of other files. Why? Because each one of these is pointed, the name is pointed to the timing location, and then is pointed at the text file. Why do I do that? It's kind of residual from old timing with wanting everything parsed out in a separate file. And it just makes things cleaner. If the poo hits the fan, you have a really clean single file to single timing location, 1-to-1. Are there any questions about that? Don't think I see any quite yet. So perfect. So one thing to remember, and I saw an email come through this weekend about it, and that is, all right, I want to push this out directly to RaceDay scoring. So if I start this exporter, this is actually not on the same computer. So if I start this exporter, it'll give me an error. But if I start this exporter, oh, I got to start web server. It's going to give me an error because there's no listen port. Why? I've got to go into RaceDay scoring, and we talk about this for every. Oop, dang it. I've got to go in to RaceDay scoring, and I've got to turn on the connector. So for this is just a test event. So if I go in and start the connector, this is now green. My streams are still going to be red. And I don't have any decoders connected right now. But if you've just, and this is another thing that happens, if you've just done an update, so I set all this up and there was an update, so I did the update, you need to make sure your firewall is allowing both through. So I'm going to click allow access. It's going to allow both through. The same goes for race result 12. If you've just updated it, then it's going to do the same thing, and it's going to ask to be permitted through the firewall. I would strongly advise you letting it through both public and private, because you're not necessarily going to be on the same internet at all times. So if you're on a public or you're on public or private, vice versa, and you go to a different race site and you're using a different Wi-Fi or a different LAN connection, and it's the opposite one, and you don't have that access through, you're going to have to go into your firewall settings and update those. So the moment we press play on, and I'll actually go and open my, oh, give me one sec. There we are. So now the web server's up and going. And so if I go into here, let's see if, so you see how we didn't get an error when we did this? But if I hit pause or stop and I turn off the connector, yes, stop the connector. I'm gonna let it stop all the way. You're gonna get an error of 3601. I'm gonna give it a second too. Okay, so my reads are off. If I press play on this, it's gonna try for a second, and then I'm gonna get this error. And it's gonna say that the 3601 connector was actively refused. Why? Because nothing's listening. So if I hit, and it's gonna go back to play. So I then turn on this connector. Now, the moment I turn it on, my streams are still red because nothing's coming in. If I go and hit play now, it should, yep, no error. I can rewind things, and both of my connections are valid and will allow things to come in. So there's a question of what's the advantage of timing direct as opposed to timing via files? Personally, it's just faster. The TCP/IP connection is faster. The file, Bryce, do you know how long it takes for the file to be exported out? Is it like every 15 seconds or so?
A file from RaceDay 12?
Yep.
It should be immediate. As soon as a passing is received in RaceDay 12, it gets exported into the actual text file.
So there you go. And then in RaceDay scoring, those are batch pulled in, and I think there's like a 15-second cache or something like that. So as a rule, it's a little bit faster with TCP/IP. Now, also with TCP/IP, you can tell when things are connected. So these are green, they say connected. With a file, there's no connection to a file. You're not connecting to another source. So if you go in and create a file, it's not going to have this dot beside it. And the files pull in as soon as something is showing that it's been updated. So yeah, there's just there's no visible way like the green versus red to see that the file is connected, even though it is. Now, you wouldn't be using a TCP/IP and file connection to the same decoder at the same time. Why? Because you can't connect to the same decoder in RaceDay scoring twice. You'd be getting duplicate data, and so that doesn't work. So I think we answered that question. No problem, Billy. I do want to show for those that are using loot boxes and active V2 chips, there is another layer. And I'm going to pull this up because it shows you, this is a guide applicable to those who be utilizing loot boxes at split points. So if you don't know what a loot box is, you can tune out. If you have loot boxes and you have red active V2 chips, then it is this is like important. So some settings here are, you're going to go in and you're going to do your normal timing points. So in timing, you're going to do your timing points. You're going to have those set up. You're also probably going to be setting up automatic timing points with loop and channel IDs, right? On top of that, on your main window and participant data, user-defined fields, you have another subset of information that a lot of times I'll use. And that is having a user-defined display name of loot box device. And what it does is it changes out your the information for your channels and allows you to put in an actual loot box and active management box, or not active management box, sorry, active extension, USB box. You can put in the actual name of those into, so like channel 2, loop 1 is going to be A2174. That way I have a name for that decoder pushing over to RaceDay scoring. And so same with channel 5. Channel 5 has 2. My base, my active management, or my active extension is A2220. And my loop box pointing back at that is channel 5 loop 4. As you can see, I've changed out loop 4 there, and it is alpha 2278. So depending on how many decoders you have out there, you can set all those. Now, if you're using the track boxes, or the active track boxes, you can set those up as a 1-to-1, and it works quite well. You don't have to set them up in here. Steve is asking, can you have a mix of direct and file imports on different decoders? Yes. You can set his example is, can you have everything coming in TCP/IP and not have that announcer decoder coming in TCP/IP, using that as a file by itself? Absolutely. You just need to set what's coming out. So you would just want to select what decoders are pushing out via your TCP/IP. And then, again, I'm saving these files regardless. And so I would just then go into my file and file connect into my announcer if I'm going to do it that way. So that, I realize it's a lot, especially for active. And again, the reason why I'm not showing everything in active is because it is quite literally right here. And this is a breakdown of exactly what I showed you. And it's setting up the TCP/IP exporter right here. So again, we're just making sure you see that you have access to this. How do you get there? Again, get help, view help guides, and type in race result right there. And you will have 2 options, one for regular passive timing and one for active timing. And so with that being said, trying to think if there are any additional questions. Bryce, do you have anything else to add? It's a fairly streamlined process.
I think you covered that pretty well. I don't have anything else to add unless there's some other questions.
We'll hang out for a second. And again, if you have, we tell all of our timers this, that have a myriad of different hardware systems. If you send in a support ticket to our support team asking why their decoder is not connecting to the internet or something, that is something like, again, you guys on here are race result timers. So that going back to the race result support, this is the line of communication you would use if you have questions about hardware. So our support team a lot of times gets hardware related questions for all types of hardware, and they are always looking for who to point those questions to. So the easiest way to bring in a marker or gun time, so once you create that marker on your decoder in RaceDay scoring, you would just go in and you actually have, give me 1 second. Oh, I think Matt might have gotten it to you.
Yeah, there's a help guide that does go through this. So if you want to just go back to your help browser here and just search for it, it'll explain. Just search for marker reads.
And so you've got this, you can set to clear the actual start time, but in the timing locations, you have the ability beside there to pull in marker reads. And once you get in there, you can see the marker reads and map them to different, you can map different corral start times by marker reads. You can mark different event start reads. So all of this is in here. So you can see there's a marathon, a half marathon, a 5K example in this specific one. Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate everybody being on, especially you, Bryce. Thank you for joining us and being here to provide your expertise on all things race result. And again, this will be recorded, so it'll be sent out to all people that signed up, and it'll be in our youtube.com/RunSignup. So if you do need to watch this again, no big deal. But if you can't tell, we're trying to put all this directly in RaceDay scoring so you can get back to the get help button and search for things as needed. So we hope everybody has a great day. And again, thanks, Bryce, for being on. And we look forward to talking with you soon. Take care.